Hey, what's going on, guys? This is Jake at thatfitfriend.com, and today I'm going to be talking about 6 of my favorite current training shoes for wider feet. Now, an important thing to note before diving into this video is that wide exists on a spectrum. What is wide to you might not be wide for your peers, and so it's really important to understand that when a shoe fits wider, it can have a little bit of variance there because wide can come into E, 2E, 3E, 4E, for example, and those are all technically clarified as wider shoes. Also, something to consider is that when you are transitioning between different shoes, if you've been wearing something narrower your whole life and you go into something slightly wider, that will naturally feel wide to you despite maybe not even being a wider shoe per se. And so that's something we also need to consider when reading comments and whatnot. And the last thing I'll touch on is the upper volume of shoes can influence this a lot. So the different materials that companies use in the sense of accommodating different foot widths and whatnot, that can also heavily influence the width of a shoe along with the midfoot and how that feels as well in correlation to that upper. But all that said, I will try my best to contextualize the sizing of these shoes and who they'll be best for and when they're going to be used best in the gym. That said, let's dive in. The first two shoes I want to cover is the Innovate F-Lite and the Innovate F-Lite Max. Now, why I'm including these into a single pick is because the last construction, or aka the mold and the fit of these shoes, is very similar. So if you buy a size 10 in the F-Lite, it's going to feel very similar in the F-Lite Max. The only real difference is their heel to toe drops. This is 4 millimeters, this is 6 millimeters, and their midsoles and how they're constructed. The F-Lite Max has a TPU stabilizer, whereas the Innovate F-Lite has more of a traditionally fully foam midsole. But when it comes to their straight up fit, both will be very similar. And now when we're looking at the measurements of the sole at the widest part of the forefoot up here, we have a width of 4.5 inches for my size 10 shoes here. The insoles of these measure about 4 to 4.15 inches. So you can cross-reference that hopefully with your feet. I am a size 10, I buy a 10 in all my reviews. And now just talking on sizing before I dive into why I like these shoes, is in the F-Lite and the F-Lite Max and the F-Fly, which is also a wider option that I'm not including right now, you're gonna wanna go up a half size for most foot anatomies. Narrow feet, you can typically get away going true to size, but medium and wider feet, go up a half size. These have notoriously run a little bit short, and then that will just hedge your bets too regarding width. Now, where are these shoes gonna be best served in the gym? If you're a CrossFit athlete or you're somebody who does a lot of cross training and lifting, these models can be awesome. The F-Lite Max is gonna have a bit more of a bias towards lifting, and so keep that in mind when I talk through why I like these shoes. The F-Lite Max is definitely gonna have a bias to giving you more stability. If you like a little bit more heel, a little bit more support in your shoes, that's where the F-Lite Max will take the edge over the F-Lite. The F-Lite's gonna be a little bit more well-rounded. Now, what makes these shoes pretty awesome? So first, they have the PowerFlow Max midsole that Innovate uses in some of their training shoes. This foam midsole, I think, does a really good job at keeping the shoes relatively lightweight while also blending stability and versatility really well. If you're doing cross training, for example, doing plyometrics or any form of dynamic movements, both of these shoes can feel pretty good. The F-Lite will feel a bit better just with its more playful sole. It doesn't have the TPU stabilizer, but for the most part, I think the PowerFlow Max midsole can do a really good job at accommodating a lot of different tasks in these shoes. The second reason to like these shoes is their overall breathability. So with these models, you have a very lightweight mesh upper, and then you also have this Met cradle that encages the midfoot. This helps give you additional lockdown while keeping the weight and bulk of these shoes relatively minimal and promoting general breathability. If you train in hotter climates or if your feet traditionally run warm, that's where I think the F-Lite and the F-Lite Max can come into play. They're going to give you a bit more ventilation than other models out there. The third reason why I've enjoyed these shoes is just their general durability and their outsole tread. These shoes have done a really good job at gripping a lot of different surfaces, and I think if you like to vary your training a lot, or if you're just buying them for CrossFit and cross training and you train like an athlete outdoors and indoors, these outsoles grip really well, and for the most part, these shoes kind of do a really good job across the board for most tasks. I have deadlifted well over 455 in both of these shoes. I have used them for heavier leg days. I have used them for dynamic work. And again, if you want something that's going to have a bit more of a blend for versatility, go with the F-Lite, and then go with the F-Lite Max for a stability bias if you like a bit more support. But overall, the F-Lite Max and F-Lite have been awesome options for wider feet. The next shoe I want to cover is the Altra Solstice XT3. Now, when it comes to just pure width measurements, the sole of this model for my size 10 shoe comes out to about 4.35, 4.5 inches, and then the insole for this shoe measures at 4 inches. Now, where is this shoe going to be best served? If you want a zero drop training shoe that can be good for some short runs, some lifting, and some cross training, that's where the Solstice XT3 I think is going to excel. It is one of the few zero drop shoes that give you a bit of midsole on the market that also fits wider feet with its more anatomical toe box. Now, some things to like like with this shoe is number one, the midsole does a really good job, I think, of accommodating a lot of different tasks. And I think if you're somebody who's a little bit more generalist in the gym and you like to lift, you like to jump, but then you also like to do some treadmill work pre or post workout or even some intervals, this model feels a little bit more comfortable than some of the other shoes included in this list that have denser midsoles. So I like it as a generalist shoe for the wider footed individual who wants more of that zero drop, more natural feel with their footwear when they're training. The second thing to like with the shoe is its overall weight and flexibility. The materials feel very light on the feet and it flexes really well and breaks in really fast. This model is not going to be one of those shoes that you have to wear for multiple weeks to feel really good on the foot. This model typically breaks in within a session or two and it breathes well, and that's because it does have lighter upper materials. The third thing to like with this shoe is I find that the upper does a really good job at accommodating thicker forefeet and even slightly higher insteps. So compared to the other shoes in this list that do have lower gussets or just not as much volume in the forefoot, this shoe does a pretty good job, I think, of accommodating a lot of different foot anatomies. Now, a couple of things to think about with the Altra Solstice XT3 is number one, the lack of tongue gusset is kind of annoying. I talk about that in my review. And then also they didn't change the outsole and midsole tread up here in the forefoot, which was an issue I had with the two. And so if you do a lot of outdoor training, you will want to consider that with this model. This can start to lip away from the softer midsole. And so you might want to consider options like the F-Lite or some of the other shoes in this video if you like to train outdoors. But overall, the Altra Solstice XT3 can be a fantastic option for the generalist who wants a zero drop wide shoe in the gym. The next shoe I want to cover is the While on Earth Move Trainer. Now, when it comes to the measurements of this shoe, from a straight up sole measurement, this model comes out to 4.5 inches. The insole of the shoe comes out to about 4 inches as well. Now, where is the While on Earth Move Trainer going to excel? If you're a generalist, again, in the gym, and you like a slightly higher heel to toe drop for your training, this can be a good option to go with. It's going to be one of those shoes that works for a little bit of lifting, some cross training, daily wear, and then even some CrossFit. So I don't love this shoe as a super niche shoe, but from a just wider fitting shoe for doing a little bit of everything, it can be a decent option. Now, 3 things to like with the Move Trainer is number one, the upper I think does a pretty good job of giving you a nice wider fit and giving you a nice level of lockdown. The tongue does have a gusset, and the upper does a pretty good job of just locking you down for just general stuff in the gym. So if you're doing leg press, any form of split squat, lunge, or even some general plyos, this model will, I think, do a decent job at giving you a nice level of security. The second thing to like with the shoe is its overall stability. So the midsole of this shoe runs a little bit more on the medium density side, and then you also have these TPU overlays around the medial and lateral midfoot, forefoot, and heel. This helps give you a nice lockdown when you're lifting. And so if you want a shoe that has a bit more stability to it, that's where the shoe can also excel. And the third thing to like with this model is its general comfort for daily wear. It can be a decent option for travel if you resonate with one of the colorways. It is going to run a little bit more dense, so it's not going to be as plush as something like an on-cloud shoe, but it can be that trainer that you can bring out and about to travel in, walk in, and then also go take to the gym, and it can do a pretty good job, and the colorways have a bit more of a casual appearance to them. The next shoe I want to cover is the Rad 1 V2, and yes, this shoe is making it because from a pure measurement standpoint, and if you take the insole out, this model I think has improved with its overall width for the CrossFit focused individual. And so for the sole, we have a width of 4.5 inches for my size 10 shoe here, and then for the insole, it comes out to about 4 inches at the widest part of the forefoot. And now again, I just mentioned, if you do have a wider foot and you find the forefoot to feel a little bit snug in this model, try taking out the insole or swap in a thinner insole, and I guarantee you you're gonna have a better fit with this shoe. Now, 3 things to like with the Rad 1 V2 is number one, it is incredibly versatile in the gym. So if you like to lift, do CrossFit, cross train, and do short interval runs between like 400 and 600 meters, this model can excel for those contexts. It feels really good in all of those verticals, and it should be one of those kind of like foolproof, I don't have to think about my shoe type of shoes in the gym. The second thing to like with the shoe is its overall grip with its outsole and how this outsole can help stabilize the foot from a both lateral and medial standpoint. So with this shoe, you have a full rubber tread here with a herringbone tread pattern. Does a really good job at giving you a lot of bite on a lot of different surfaces. And then you also have the wave design on the medial and lateral side of the shoe that helps give you additional lockdown. And so for anything that has to do with lifting or even giving you a bite for things like rope climbs or any form of CrossFit workout where you might have a bit of abrasion here, this outsole I think does a good job at giving you both grip and also protection and stabilization. The third thing to like with this shoe is the general upper security of this model. This model's upper I think does a really good job at locking down the foot, especially with the heel and the forefoot. You have a nice padded mesh tongue here with a gusset that I think accommodates a lot of different foot anatomies really well. And then you also have a boot back here that has a bit of structure and a TPU lip here for additional support and security while giving you a bit of performance in CrossFit WODs that have handstand push-ups. Overall, the Rad 1 V2 can be a good option, I would say, for anywhere from E to double E with feet. And if you you have 3E width feet, tread lightly. You might need to take the insole out in the shoe to get them to fit perfect. The next model I want to cover is the Born Primitive Savage 1. So when it comes to the measurements of the shoe, at the widest part of the forefoot, we have a width of 4.15 inches for my size 10 model. And then for the insole, it comes out to about 3.75, 3.85 inches. Now, who is this model going to be best for? I think if you like the more old school feeling training shoes that have the lower stack heights, they have a 4mm drop, and they have a very flexible feel, that is where the shoe is going to excel. Now, 3 things to like with this shoe is number 1, the grippy outsole. I love this outsole for doing a lot of different things. You could train indoors and outdoors. You could do sports in this shoe. And if you like the lower stack of this model and the ground feel, I think you're going to love the grip that you get on different surfaces with this shoe. The second thing to like with this shoe is the overall durability for different training contexts. This model has done a really good job for most of my training asks, and most of the folks in my community who rock the BP Savage ones. Very rarely do you see durability as a major concern. You have this mesh knit upper with synthetic overlays, and it does a pretty good job with abrasion resistance. You also have a TPU cut back here on the heel for additional support and security and protection to prevent this boot from breaking down too fast. The third thing to like with this shoe is if you like shoes that have a lower feel to the ground, that's also where the Savage 1 is going to come into play. I mentioned this earlier in the who's this going to be best for section, but this model has a lower stack height. Honestly, one of the lower stack heights of all the shoes featured in this video. And so for things like deadlifts and different strength workouts where you want more ground feedback, that's where this shoe can excel. Even for plyometrics, I like the forefoot and just how much ground feedback you get when doing plyometrics in this shoe. Now, something to think about with the Born Primitive Savage 1, and my only real gripe with this model is the tongue construction. This thin mesh tongue can be a little bit abrasive when you're breaking them in. My suggestion, wear longer socks when you're doing so. It'll help the tongue feel a little bit more comfortable. But overall, the Born Primitive Savage 1 does a really good job in the gym from both versatility and durability context. Now with this shoe, it's going to resonate best, I think, with E to double E width feet. If you have 3E width feet, you may want to go with other options featured in this video. All right, I know I said 6 shoes, but I wanted to actually throw a wild card in here, and that is the Xero Shoes X1. I know Xero Shoes is traditionally a barefoot shoe company, but hear me out because this model actually has a midsole, and I feel like it does offer a nice different angle for traditional training shoes if you want a lower stack height with your models. Now, who is this shoe going to be best for? Now, obviously this shoe is built for basketball, but honestly for training, they have been exceptional. They have been really good for lifting and cross training, and that typically stands true for most basketball and court shoes. So it doesn't surprise me that this model also has a nice versatile approach in the gym. Now, 3 things to like with this shoe is number 1, if you want a zero drop shoe that has a very low midsole stack height and a lot of ground feel, this can be a good option to go with. I almost liken them to the Altra Solstice XT3 in the sense that they have that zero drop lower stack feel, but this shoe stack is a little bit lower and it's a bit denser. So it's going to give you more ground feedback and be better for things like heavier deadlifts and heavier leg days if that's something you're after and you want more stability in those contexts. The second thing to like with this shoe is its upper security and just its overall fit. This model has a good amount of upper volume because it's a basketball shoe and you have a slightly higher boot. So when it comes to overall security, the shoe does a good job and it accommodates different insteps, I think, really well without having too much overlay here with the laces if you got to crank them tight. And so from a general fit and security standpoint, the X1 excels in the gym. The third thing I like with this shoe is the grip and just how athletic it feels on the foot. So with this model, you have a bit of toe spring and it biases that medial side. So for any form of multi-directional movement, single leg work or lateral jumping or lateral training, this model is going to be one of your better bets in the sense of feeling a bit more dynamic and moving well with the foot. It also has a lot of flexibility due to the low stack height. And so that said, if you are looking for that zero drop shoe that has good stability and feels very athletic, don't sleep on the Xero Shoes X1. They have been surprisingly solid and I didn't expect to like them as much as I have, to be quite honest. All right guys, that wraps up this breakdown of some of my favorite options for training shoes for wider feet. If you have additional questions on any of these models or models that I didn't touch on, drop a comment down below or reach out to me personally, whichever you prefer. And as always, y'all, drop a like on the video, drop subscribe to the channel. I'll see you guys in the next one.